So it has been about 3 months since I checked in on the weird and wacky world of the celebrity exorcist phenomenon, which I began introducing my audience to here on the Deep Dive Project back in January and February of this year. And there have been some more things that have come out since that I want to spend some time talking about. I am still working on putting together a comprehensive, formal deep dive on celebrity exorcists and deliverance ministry in the Catholic Church. And so while I am working on that, I figured there's no reason why I can't continue to bring these articles and everything else that I am learning to everybody here, just to share with you what I am learning in real time and to share the resources that I am using and to hopefully start generating some discussion as well, because I do believe that there is an aspect of this entire situation that creates a matter of public concern, because these people, the things that they are saying and the things that they are promoting have the potential and already have impacted people who are not practicing Catholics and have no connection to this world in any way whatsoever. And so for that reason, it's something that I think deserves to be discussed. If you haven't seen the other videos that I have done on celebrity exorcists, you can go and find them on the channel or on the podcast, depending on where you are listening to this from. And if you're interested in reading what I'm going to be referencing today, you can find it all linked down below in a source document. Because of the fact that I know that the topic I am discussing is going to bring some people in from far-flung corners of the internet, people who are not familiar with my work, people who are diehard fans of these people and the things that they have to say and the teachings that they promote and everything else, I want to make sure that we are nearly on the same page as we can possibly be going into this thing, because I've had these people showing up in the comment sections of these videos that I have done, and they are making some wild assumptions. And so I want us all to be on the same page here. So I have some notes that I jotted down before I started recording, and forgive me, I'm going to be looking down at these while I go over this. So the first and most important disclaimer, and this goes for everything that I publish on the Deep Dive Project, there's a trigger warning and a viewer advisory, because what we are going to be discussing will be disturbing to some audiences, so viewer discretion is advised, and please keep your own mental health in mind at all times. If you are a fan of these figures and a follower of their counsels and protocols, I want you to know that my goal here is not to convince you to completely turn against these people. I want to draw your attention to the issues that I and others have picked up on, and I want you to pay attention to the actual substance of the things that they say, because I think that a large number of people, unfortunately, have submitted their critical thinking skills to people like these celebrity exorcists who appear qualified and competent. So take what I have to say with a grain of salt. Make your own determinations, do what you want, completely disregard everything that I have to say if you want, but know that my goal is not to drive a wedge between you and religious or spiritual figures who you find important and helpful in your own journey. I just want you to pay attention to the things that they are actually saying. And so with that said, additionally, you should know that I am not a fan of any of these figures. I do not have any respect for them, and I find a good bit of what they have to say abhorrent, and that is not going to change. And your rants and rages in the comment section are not going to change, but they do help boost my content in the algorithm, so I appreciate it. But if you are expecting a gentle critique of these people and the things that they are promoting, you're in the wrong place. I give respect where respect is earned, and none of these people have yet to earn mine. And you may dish out respect like party favors to whomever struts around demanding it, and that is completely your prerogative, but it is not mine. And so last but not least, the issues that I take with these celebrity exorcists have nothing to do, okay, with whether or not I believe in demons or spiritual evil. Because as I've said before, I do not believe that spiritual and religious beliefs are mutually exclusive from criticisms of the people who use those beliefs and the very real fear that they could generate in so many to manipulate people into following what they say. That is not okay. And as I have laid out in my previous episodes on the subject, in my opinion, and in the opinions of other people, I'm not the only one who's taking issue with this, there is a lot wrong with what these celebrity exorcists have to say. And so if you're unable to untangle your emotional connections to these people from the objective points that I am trying to make, you're going to have a difficult time hearing the things that I have to say, and you should know that going in. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get our first article pulled up. Like I said, I'll link down below in a source document. This was published back in March 4th on Where Peter Is, written by Mike Lewis, and the title is Father Chad Ripperger's Dangerous Message is About to Reach Millions. This was published just prior to the publication of Chad's interview on the Sean Ryan Show, which is a very, very popular podcast, at least here in the United States, that has millions of monthly views. He was platformed on that podcast and given 4 hours to just run rampant and wax eloquent about literally just about every single topic under the sun. If you are unfamiliar with Mike Lewis's writing, I highly recommend checking him out and checking out his pieces on Chad Ripperger specifically. He has a few previous articles that he's written, and I really, really appreciate the perspective that he is weighing in on. And so far, he is the only other person that I have found who seems to be like pretty aware of what is happening in this like celebrity exorcist ecosystem in a way that goes beyond like where the general like public discourse is currently at. So I think he's a great source of information. He always cites his sources as well, which I definitely appreciate. And you cannot say the same for Chad Ripperger. So getting into this. On Thursday, March 5th, the Sean Ryan Show, one of the highest rated podcasts today and hosted by former Navy SEAL and CIA contractor Sean Ryan, former Navy SEAL and CIA contractor. You know, just mention this off the side. I have a lot of plants in my home. I really like plants. Green plants specifically, because I am not a plant. And I noticed when I've watched bits and pieces of the Sean Ryan Show, like I did for this interview that he did with Chad Ripperger, to me, it looks like there's only one plant on that set, and it ain't green. So they're releasing this episode featuring Father Chad Ripperger, the traditionalist Catholic priest and exorcist who has built a massive online following through an appearance on far-right Catholic YouTube shows, podcasts, and speaking engagements. When Ryan's podcast featured exorcist Father Dan Rehill in October 2024, the episode drew 3.6 million views on YouTube alone. Ripperger is a bigger name. Given the show's typical audience and the 3.6 million YouTube views for the Rehill episode alone, the potential reach of this episode is enormous. This is concerning because Ripperger's message is not just eccentric speculation about demons in the end times. His teachings have concrete and potentially tragic consequences. He has claimed that people diagnosed with bipolar disorder can be taken completely off of their meds through his spiritual protocols. He teaches that in marriage, consent is only granted once and forever on the wedding day, opening the door for abuse and, dare I say, marital rape. And he promotes a framework of generational curses that many theologians say has no foundation in Catholic tradition. These ideas are about to reach a vastly larger audience. Preview clips are already circulating on social media give a taste of what's coming. In one, Ripperger claims that alien abductions are real, but they are actually encounters with demons. Quote, if you actually look at what the demons are supposedly doing, it is identical to the same things that demons do to people who are possessed, end quote. In the clip, he also dismisses evolution as, quote, not only just scientifically problematic, but just even theologically and philosophically problematic. He also connects the Epstein case to satanic ritual, noting that the layout of the island gives an indication that it was heavily involved in the occult. And another clip, he speculates about the end times, claiming that, quote, before the Antichrist comes, one of the things that we know from the fathers of the church is that there will be a worldwide implosion of people's morality. He interprets the mark of the beast as an inversion of baptismal marks, possibly tied to a worldwide digital currency. or to the implantable brain chip Neuralink, about which Ripperger says, quote, "You're not going to be able to get that chip without some type of renunciation of Christ. There's going to have to be some religious thing you're going to have to accept that you know is contrary to the will of God and contrary to Christ," end quote. Some really interesting things about these quotes and what he had to say more broadly in that interview, which, by the way, I have an entire video where I went through and discussed the points in this interview that stood out to me personally. If you want to go and check that out, the interview, like I said, is over 4 hours long. So it was not a point-by-point refutation breakdown. It was also incredibly disorganized. The interview itself was. They were like all over the place and seemed to have really like very little structure aside from like ad breaks for sponsors and things like that. So if you feel like my criticism of that interview is chaotic, just know the interview in and of itself is very chaotic. And he talks in that interview about the Epstein files. So Sean Ryan asks him about the Epstein files, and Chad has something to say about it, of course, because he has an opinion on everything. But he also implies in this interview that he hasn't actually authentically engaged with the like substantive Epstein files themselves. He hasn't like read the testimonies or the stories of victim survivors. I don't even think he's found his way to justice.gov/Epstein. So he like was giving opinions and perspectives on a very complex and serious human rights crisis as a person who, by his own admission, has barely done the legwork to even understand the situation in a comprehensive way, which I just think is really important to point out. Because if he's willing to gloss over the details and yet provide like concrete opinions on things about something like this, where he admitted that he's done very little engaging with the actual information, what else do you think he's doing that with? Another interesting thing about the whole mark of the beast Neuralink thing, this was something that I also discussed, and this is one of the things that he says that I was very clearly and definitively able to determine is not something that the Catholic Church teaches. And look, I'm not a practicing Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I understand the world, but I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore. So you might be wondering why I would care whether or not the things that Chad has to say are in line with the Catholic Church. Well, it's because of the fact that he is wearing a cassock and a collar and presenting himself as a representative of an authority on the Catholic Church and the Catechism and the Catholic Church's doctrine and everything else. And he is promoting and pronouncing things that are just factually incorrect. The Catholic Church does not teach that the mark of the beast is some physical thing. They do not believe that it's some physical like sign or something that you're going to have on your body, on your forehead, or wherever else. For the Catholic Church, the mark of the beast, which comes from the book of Revelation, by the way, which is a very fantastical book in the Bible. It's more of a philosophical or theological device than it is something actually real and substantial. But Chad here believes that it's actually something real and substantial. It's going to be like Neuralink. And he says with full chest and no couching of like, this is my opinion, this is what I think, this, you know, nothing like that. You're not going to be able to get that chip without some type of renunciation of Christ. Where is he getting that information from? He never cites a source. I'm going to guess, though, because he has said this as well. I dropped my pen. The demons told him. He's going to say that the demons told him because he has talked about in this interview specifically and in plenty of others that the demons tell him all kinds of things, which is also an issue in and of itself, which we will get into in a bit as well. Ripperger delivers all of this information with the unblinking confidence of a man who has never encountered a question he couldn't answer off of the top of his head, whether the topic is biology, psychology, vaccines, yoga, vampires, Harry Potter, or demonology. For many Sean Ryan Show listeners, most of whom will likely be unfamiliar with Catholic theology, this will sound authoritative, even profound. But the truth is that much of what Ripperger says comes straight from conspiracy theories and pseudoscience, and much of his message is deeply harmful. His confident delivery masks a pattern of fabrication, superstition, and magical thinking that causes real harm to real people. Central to Ripperger's worldview is the notion of generational curses and ancestral spirits. The idea that demons can be passed down through family lines, races, and places, skipping generations and oppressing the innocent. His associate, Dan Schneider, who has appeared twice on the Sean Ryan show to promote the same framework, explains it in terms of inherited spiritual privation. The sins of a father strip his family of divine protection, allowing demons to attach across generations. Schneider frames the concept as Thomistic and patristic, rooted in St. Thomas Aquinas and the Church Fathers. It isn't. And I will say, because of the kind of person that Ripperger is, because of the kind of people that are in his deliverance ministry, they are hardline pre-Vatican II traditionalists, and you cannot go very far into any of this stuff. Their protocol, the Liber Christo thing, any of the books that have been written, these interviews, you cannot really go very far before you start running up against Thomistic theology and philosophy, and these men are simply obsessed with this medieval saint who had medieval things to say about the medieval times that he was living in, however many hundreds of years ago. And they are bound and determined to apply those medieval thoughts to our 21st century lives here in Western civilization. I can't imagine what would go wrong. As Mexican exorcist Father Regolio Alcantara explained in an analysis of the movement, the theory of generational spirits appeared for the first time among Protestants through pagan inspiration. A Protestant missionary, Kenneth McCall, is the one who gave the impulse to the practice of healing the family tree. Eventually, it became a movement. Alcantara described how it entered Catholic circles through the charismatic movement in the 1960s, not from the Church Fathers, as Ripperger claims. Father Peter Joseph, an Australian theologian, wrote that this idea of generational spirits is a mythical notion imported from sects outside of the church. Father Joseph asserts that no father, no doctor of the church, no saint, no pope, no council ever taught or even implied such a thing. It is a pure fiction without foundation in sacred scripture or sacred tradition. There is not a word on the subject in the 688 pages of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Hey, I think that the people who are following and supporting Chad, faithful Catholics who are listening to the things that he is saying and taking his advice on board because they are trying to be more faith-filled and holy Catholic people, I think they need to know about the fact that this man that they are following is, like, in the nicest way possible, taking liberties. Like, that's putting it mildly, taking liberties with the teachings of the religious organization that he is a part of. I think people should know that. I think people should know, I think his followers should know, that he is fabricating fiction, that he is drawing on influences from places completely outside of his own religion. I think people should know that. Father Joseph also wrote in an email which he gave permission to share, quote, "To Father Ripperger, I offer this challenge. If the fathers taught about generational spirits, please name the fathers and name the specific works and give references within those works so we can verify it for ourselves and also see the context of any such statements in case that is relevant." Ripperger has not responded to this challenge. Chad never cites a source. He never cites a source. He may give some sort of like squishy, well, the church fathers say, well, you know, actually the demons have told me. Well, the demon of Beelzebub told me one time while I was exorcising this woman. Well, I've heard. He can never actually cite a concrete source. It is completely beyond him. And he has this book that he's selling, one of however many that he has, called The Science of Mental Health. And allegedly, apparently, supposedly, this book is full of references that validate the things that he's saying, that really, really beef up the claims that he's making about mental health and about how misguided and incorrect and, frankly, insufficient modern psychology and mental health care are, and how it all really boils down to demons. Allegedly, in this book, he has all kinds of references. I would love to see those references. I would love to see his citations. I would just like to know where he's getting his information from, where he's claiming to derive this information from, because he never cites a source. But if I were to do that, or if Mike Lewis were to do that, we would be crucified on the altar of public opinion. But when it's a man wearing a collar and a cassock, talking in a soft tone, and claiming to converse with demons, all of a sudden, we gotta take his word for it. Sure. And oh, by the way, I do believe that generational trauma is a thing. I absolutely do believe that the traumas that are inflicted upon our ancestors, be they are parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, all the way back down the line, can be transmuted and replicated and passed on to future generations. I think at this point in time, I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's something that is pretty well recognized. It's the reason why every single time I go to a doctor's appointment, they ask me if anybody in my family has a history of alcohol abuse, because that can be hereditary and passed on. And I do believe that generational trauma is real. And I do believe that there is a responsibility for each member of each new generation to work to heal that trauma. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to have that conversation in an effective way, listen, look, I am not a mental health professional, but even I know you need to be coming at that from a trauma-informed place. And I have not ever gotten the impression in anything that Chad has said that he is in any way, shape, or form trauma informed. In fact, he seems pretty like derisive and what's the word that I'm looking for? Just like derisive and unappreciative of like trauma, of mental health care, because again, for him, it all boils down to demons. And I don't really think that the way that he wants to go about addressing these generational harms is going to net the kind of positive outcomes that people are hoping for. I wish that that were the case, but I simply find that very hard to believe based on everything that I know. And look, I understand you may be watching this, you may be typing in the comments section right now, well, I've done such and such protocol, and I read such and such book, and I always do such and such prayer every day, and it has completely liberated me, and I feel so free and so at peace and so happy and blah, 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 blah. Great. Great. I'm so glad. I'm so happy for you. That is good. That's great. I'm glad. But you should know that not everybody is like you. Not everybody's going to respond to things the way that you have. Not everybody's going to find benefit in things the way that you have. And oh, by the way, the things that you might have found helpful could actually, to a completely different person with different life circumstances and experiences and genetic makeup, be a very, very, very harmful. And in fact has. And in fact has. Many theologians and bishops' conferences, most recently the Spanish Bishops' Conference in November 2024, have condemned this notion as antithetical to Catholic tradition and theology. The Spanish bishops wrote that these ideas stray from the tradition and magisterium of the Church and can cause great moral and spiritual harm to the holy people of God. Yet Ripperger's message is saturated with it, and his deliverance prayer book, reviewed by Father Joseph, reflects the work of a priest who, in Father Joseph's assessment, has become obsessed with the devil and now attributes all sorts of things to evil spirits. I also do think, in my opinion, it seems like Chad was completely just like transfixed by, fascinated with, completely sucked into the satanic panic of the like 1980s, and I don't think that he's ever fully escaped it. This is Ripperger's most fundamental deception. He dresses up a modern extra-Catholic invention as ancient, excuse me. This is Ripperger's most fundamental deception. He dresses up a modern extra-Catholic invention as ancient tradition, and his audience, trusting his collar and his confident delivery, have no way to know the difference. In the preview clips, Ripperger claims that the idea of extraterrestrial life is heavily rooted in the evolutionary hypothesis and dismisses evolution itself as scientifically, theologically, and philosophically problematic. He has rejected biological evolution outright, not on the basis of serious reasoning, but because, as he has explained, he dismissed the idea as absurd when he first heard of it as a teenager. So, as a child, he decided that the evolutionary theory, it's a theory, Chad, not a hypothesis, the theory of evolution. First, you have a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, you determine whether or not the hypothesis is true, you develop a theory, and then you test that theory to try to determine fact. It's called the scientific method. You may be unfamiliar, but it's called the theory of evolution, the evolutionary theory. And he decided as a teenager it didn't make any sense to him, so he was just going to completely disregard it as absurd. And that is something that he's carried on into present day. And now I have reason to wonder whether or not Chad has ever emotionally and mentally matured past the point of that teenage child who decided that something that he didn't understand was simply absurd. because he seems to apply that same line of reasoning to literally everything else. Oh, modern psychology is absurd. Somebody being gay, it's absurd. They can change their mind. A woman expecting her husband to respect her boundaries and her consent within their marriage, absurd. And if you don't agree, it seems to all boil down to demons. You got the demon of Lilith, you got the demon of Beelzebub, you got the demon of Agamorth or whatever name. That's what it all comes down to. I think the public education system failed this man when he was a child growing up in the 1960s in America. Rather than engage with the church's long tradition of dialogue between faith and science, the two are not mutually exclusive, Ripperger appeals to junk science, Protestant fundamentalism, and superstition, interpreting the natural world through rigid first principles of his own design that lead him to bizarre conclusions about UFOs, aliens, and the preternatural that have more in common with pop culture tropes of the 1970s and 80s than Catholic tradition. Science and religion are not mutually exclusive. While I may have been raised in a very conservative environment as a homeschooled child in the American Midwest, even my own religious science textbook that I had growing up went to great lengths to explain in like the first couple of chapters why science and religion are not mutually exclusive, and why it is perfectly acceptable to, as a religious person, to also have an appreciation for science and for the things that it can teach us. And I'm not exactly sure why that has gone completely over Chad's bald little head, but it definitely has. Last year, Ripperger spoke at a conference alongside geocentrist and anti-Semite Robert Sejenis and affirmed that he too is a geocentrist, someone who believes the sun orbits the earth, saying, "This is why geocentrism plays such a key role in this, because if we are at the center of the universe, at least in relationship to mass, the fact is that then there is something different about us that's not the same as everywhere else." This began at timestamp 4925 in the interview. What is that verbal word salad supposed to mean? And if you believe that the sun orbits the earth, do you also believe that the earth is flat? These are very outdated and disproven scientific talking points. The problems don't end with fabricated traditions and junk science, though. Ripperger's views on women are degrading and dangerous. Mike Lewis has an article specifically discussing Chad's harmful views on marriage. I have a video discussing it. You can go find it if you want. It's very, very interesting. And a documentary he produced with Timothy Gordon for Candace Owens' platform, so this guy is tied in. He advances a strict authoritarian vision in which wives are bound to obey their husbands in everything but sin. He claims that women's resistance to male authority is rooted in the curse of Eve, and that demons exploit women to undermine men. Any challenge by a woman to male authority is pre-interpreted as a spiritual defect or demonic influence, and he asserted that even trad wives are unduly influenced by feminism. His teachings on marriage build from this. Ripperger frames sexual relations within a marriage almost entirely in terms of obligation and enforcement, dismissing even a headache as an insufficient reason to refuse the marital act, noting that consent was given once and for all on the wedding day. Ripperger explicitly rejects the church's covenantal language for marriage in favor of describing it as a contract centered on a conferral of bodily rights. In this framework, consent as an ongoing moral reality effectively disappears. This line of thinking gives husbands a sense of entitlement backed by the threat of mortal sin, a system that easily normalizes, excuses, or even sanctifies spousal abuse. Based on everything that Chad has said in this interview and in other interviews, based on everything that I have read, this man is a misogynist to his core, and he hates women. He hates them. He doesn't want them to have rights. He doesn't want them to be seen as human. He doesn't want them to have the ability to take up space. He hates women. And I think it's really, really interesting how deeply that misogyny goes. And I think it's a little bit hilarious because Chad nor any of these other misogynistic people that are getting platformed right now would be here were it not for the birth canal of a woman. And there is nothing that they can do about that. But he is very, very angry, and he rages every single chance that he gets. And you can tell how he feels about people by the way that he talks about them. He speaks about women and about gay people in the most inhuman terms. It's really, Don't take my word for it. Go and listen to this interview and see for yourself. It is so incredibly obvious, and I am flummoxed at how anybody in 21st century America could be hearing the things that he's saying and not realize that like something is clearly amiss here. It just, I don't get it. And then there is the question of whether Ripperger even understands what he's talking about, and that is a question that I myself have asked many times. As the above quote on geocentrism shows, when his spoken words are transcribed, many of his statements amount to little more than unsubstantiated claims padded with jargon and filler words. His supposed expertise on Thomistic philosophy was recently examined by scholastic scholar V.J. Tarantino, who found one of his talks to be pseudo-scholastic utter nonsense. Although the outside package can seem impressive, a nerdy, confident, erudite seeming priest with a reputation for being an expert in many disciplines, rattling off big words and complicated sentences. When scholars put his words under a microscope, what is revealed is sprawling, terminologically overburdened text that is all gibberish, as Tarantino put it. Father Chad Ripperger is, as a friend with a PhD in philosophy put it plainly, a stupid person's idea of a smart person. It may be very true that Chad has people around him in his deliverance ministry who are educated on things like psychiatry or counseling, who are educated on medicine, but based on everything that I have seen and read, the research that I've done and what's available on the public record, Chad himself has absolutely no qualifications and no education whatsoever to qualify him to weigh in on and talk about the things that he does, particularly when it comes to mental health and mental illness. And that, I think, is where it really becomes clear that this guy is completely out of his depth and relying on people not looking too closely at the things that he's saying to kind of like get him under the radar. Perhaps the single most concretely dangerous thing that Ripperger has said is this. He has claimed that he has been able to get every single person who has come to him diagnosed with bipolar disorder completely off their meds within 3 months by following his protocols. He has claimed on multiple occasions that bipolar disorder is demonic obsession. In one video, now removed from YouTube, he said cases of bipolar are in fact cases of demonic obsession. I have always, every time I've listened to the explanation or the diagnostic from modern psychologists about a bipolar, I just like, well, send the guy to an exorcist. That's great. That is a very intelligent, very well phrased take on modern psychologists. Chad, good job. Good job. I can understand if you want to disregard this. I'm going to share something with you right now because I think it's relevant and important, and it directly ties into what we are talking about in this very moment. And you can take this and completely disregard it if you want to, because I am not at this point in time able to present factual information to back up the things that I am saying, because there's a lot happening behind the scenes that a lot of people do not know about. Let me just leave it at that. Regardless of whether or not you are aware of people being harmed by the things that this person has said or by the things that the people who follow him promote, has zero bearing on whether or not people have actually been harmed. And unfortunately, it is simply a matter of fact that these people who come to him with disorders and conditions that need to be managed are not coming out of the situation better off for it. Bipolar is not a demonic influence or a possession. It is a serious medical condition that needs to be carefully monitored and cared for. And advising people to just completely go off of their meds, which he's not qualified to do because he is not a doctor, and to follow these protocols that he has created because he believes that everything can be boiled down to demons, has resulted in very real harm and death occurring. You can disregard everything that I'm saying. You can ignore this. You can say you're crazy, you're making it up. I don't believe you. That's fine. I understand it's hearsay, but there are things happening in the background that you don't know about. There are impacts to people's lives that you're not seeing. There are families who have been shredded by this type of thing, who have lost members of their family and will never be able to speak with them again because of this type of thing, who are dead now because of this type of thing. You don't have to believe me. but I think you should know that. The claim that bipolar is just demons and that anyone on multiple occasions can just go off of their bipolar meds if they follow Chad's protocols for 3 months or so undermines years of work to combat the stigma of mental illness by associating it with demonic possession. And that's not just wrong. It is dangerous to vulnerable people who may stop taking prescribed medication on the word of a priest with no medical training. Do what you want. Do whatever you want. Listen to whoever you want. But be so careful about the people who you are trusting and the information that you are taking on board and the advice that you are following. Be careful. You want to think that these people have all of your best interests at heart. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't believe that that is the case in any way, shape, or form. I am not seeing a duty to care here. I'm seeing a rift. Ripperger has operated in the Archdiocese of Denver since 2016, when his Deloran Fathers were instituted as a public association of the faithful under Archbishop Samuel Aquila, who has remained supportive of Ripperger despite his heterodoxy, his dangerous views, and the controversies surrounding him. Recently, Bishop James Golka of Colorado Springs was announced as the 6th Archbishop of Denver, replacing the now retired Aquila. He will be installed on March 25th, so this has already happened. That means Golka is about to become Ripperger's new ordinary with direct authority over the priest and his society. When I first heard about the announcement, I was concerned because Golka appeared alongside Ripperger at a men's conference in Colorado Springs last November. He and Ripperger also appeared together at a diocesan rosary rally in 2023. The extent of their collaboration is unclear, but the association is concerning. I have been told, however, that Bishop Golka is a pastoral bishop in the mold of Pope Francis. I hope he will take a serious look at what Ripperger is teaching under his authority. It has been about 3 months since Golka was instituted as the new Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Denver. And as of yet, I have not heard of any sort of anything, any critical look being taken at Ripperger, any conversations occurring about the nature of his ministry and what he's doing. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It could be happening behind closed doors, and we just have no way of knowing that. But as of yet, I've yet to hear anything. And this is a word to new readers, and it works as well for new viewers of this channel. If this is the first time that you're hearing a critical word about these people. And if you're hearing about Chad Ripperger for the first time through the Sean Ryan's show, I understand the appeal. He sounds confident, learned, and authoritative. He talks about demons, end times, and spiritual combat in ways that feel real and urgent. But I would encourage you to look more closely before taking his messages to heart. His claims about the church fathers don't hold up to scrutiny. His views on women in marriage are harmful. His supposed philosophical and theological expertise does not hold up to scrutiny. And his advice on mental health care is genuinely dangerous. Ripperger is not just wrong about obscure points of theology. Real people are being harmed by his teachings, his false claims of authority, and his manipulation of vulnerable believers searching for spiritual meaning. Since I began writing about Ripperger in 2024, dozens of people have reached out to me to tell me about the harm he has caused in their lives. Please, for the sake of your well-being, spiritual, emotional, and physical, approach what he says with extreme caution. Thank you, Mike Lewis, for another fantastic article. It's been great to have his research and his articles to kind of pull on. He always cites his sources as well, which I genuinely appreciate. And it's good to have the insights of people who are still members, practicing members of the Catholic Church, because I am a little bit rusty now after nearly a decade into my deconstruction and everything. I'm not as sharp on all of the points of the catechism as I once was. So it's good to have people like this who can speak to that a bit more. And I also really, really appreciated the fact that he brought in another exorcist and some theologians as well to actually speak to the theological points that Ripperger is presenting in these interviews and everything. I think it's really, really important for people to know that they are he's taking liberties, to put it mildly. He is taking liberties with church teaching and history and everything. And I think that's something that his followers should know and should be aware of. And as I say that, I realize that that may honestly be a big part of the appeal for a lot of people. People who are being radicalized, people who are getting sucked into the even further down the identity political bullshit tube that we are living in this country right now, probably like the fact that he is like very antithetical to like a lot of what the church teaches, and holds to very outdated and like old-fashioned beliefs about people and religion and everything else. That is probably a selling point for a lot of these people. So I am probably wasting my breath. The next article that I want to read was published on a Substack called The Wild Return. This was published on April 11th of this year, and it's titled The Disobedience of Father Ripperger, Divination and the Church's Exorcist Problem by Melody Lyons. I really appreciated her taking the time to write them. This picture here says, "It is perilous to study too deeply the arts of the enemy for good or for ill," which is a quote from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Ring. Elrond said this on the fall of Saruman. It's been decades since I emerged from the influence of the occult. That's a rather long story of metanoia, and I've touched on it elsewhere. I mention it here to explain my particular interest in the growing public scandal of Father Chad Ripperger, which impacts not only the spiritual and psychological safety of Catholics, but also millions of non-Catholics who have seen him elevated by prominent media personalities such as Tucker Carlson, Sean Ryan, and Matt Fradd. The title of this article is strongly worded, but it is not intended as clickbait. The disobedience of an exorcist should raise a legitimate alarm and be discussed earnestly as a threat to the holiness of precious souls. This I know because while I don't write as an expert on exorcism, involvement with the occult nearly led to my own spiritual and physical death. A former victim of divination peddlers, I now feel an urgency to advocate for the vulnerable. If we are to accept a man's authority to teach on the most important things, we must first ask from whence comes his authority. In the case of any Catholic exorcist, that authority comes from Christ through the Church. Yet, this authority has limits, as the Church has laws guiding the actions of the exorcist that merit serious attention. The question few seem to be asking is whether Father Ripperger is following these rules, and if perhaps he is not, what are the consequences of such disobedience in the context of his ministry? There has clearly been a shift in his public teaching, and many, including self-described traditionalists, are taking notice. My purpose is to explore the question of obedience and to caution against the titillating practice of exploring the minds of demons and then using that information to instruct the faithful. I sincerely hope, dear reader, that this article does not increase traffic to those who act as mouthpieces for the demonic. That would be like sharing photos of adult entertainment, ostensibly in opposition. This behavior serves only to multiply the damage. With that in mind, I won't be linking to any of Chad's work. The demonic is abusive. Stop disseminating, glorifying, and platforming the abuse. In the early years after conversion, I would lie awake in the dark at night, sweating with fear and begging God to please never manifest to me via any locution or apparition. I knew that I hadn't been able to distinguish good from evil in the past, and I did not ever want to be faced with that confusion again. A friend tried to reassure me. All you have to do is tell a vision to pray a Hail Mary with you, and if it won't, it's a demon. What she said is not true. Even the most wicked can pray, sometimes with silver tongues and voices like angels. A clerical rapist can celebrate the liturgy, pray perfectly in Latin, sing Gregorian chant, and deceive even the devout. A wicked liar may pronounce the rites of baptism, including the prayers of exorcism. Prayer is not a magical incantation that lives in formulaic invocations. Rather, true prayer is in the raising of one's mind and heart to God and the vital and personal relationship with the living and true God, which is a direct quote from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The first time Father Ripperger casually mentioned his discourse with demons during exorcisms and flippantly threw out their names and cited them as a source for his knowledge of the demonic was the last time I intentionally listened to him, and I was angry. I had no warning that I was going to be instructed by the tongues of liars and thieves. I had not given consent. It was a violation. Keep the hell away from me. This was not profanity when I said it, but a literal command to the most popular exorcist in the world from the middle of my kitchen. Since then, I have seen Father's content pop up seemingly everywhere and is often and increasingly objectionable as he offhandedly recalls the words of demonic encounters and places the burdens of such knowledge upon the little ones of Jesus' flock. He continually seeks to elevate his profile and teachings, casually sharing gossipy bits about this demon and that devil everywhere he goes, and doing so with an air of authority, as if to imply, listen to me because I have special knowledge of the enemy. Does he really? And what advantage is it to a cleric or to the faithful to have the words of such demons as a source of knowledge? This type of special gnosis, and specifically that gained by divination, has been condemned by the church since her infancy. Again, I am not saying that I agree with what things that she is saying. I am not saying we have the same beliefs. I'm not saying I think you should have the same beliefs. I am not saying anything like that. Within the context of critically analyzing a person representing a specific religious organization, it's very useful, is it not, to look at the places where the things that they say completely diverge from the teachings of their religion, even if that means that we end up talking a lot about what the Catholic Church has to say on specific issues, which I know not everybody is going to love. But in this case, I think it is important to do that. He continually seeks to elevate I already read that. Father Ripperger's content is peppered with the babble of demons. From his own accounts, he's chatty with them in a relational sense. His sensational words are easy clickbait titles for content creators who know what excites the curiosity of the faithful. Quote, how demons think. Father Ripperger reveals Beelzebub's true identity. What a demon called Mary's greatest moment. How demons react when saints appear. Father Ripperger claims that demons revealed this to him. Demons hate Gregorian chant. These are all example titles. But what does the church say about this phenomenon? We haven't heard so far from Rome or from Fathers Ordinary in the Diocese of Denver. What we do know is that the church has strict laws governing the engagement of exorcists with the demonic. The guidelines are spelled out in the canon law and in the ritual text, exorcisms, and related supplications. That's church documentation. Any disobedience to those guidelines not only puts those involved in the exorcism in danger, but also everyone under a priest's spiritual care. Because of the viral nature of modern media, that care is disseminated to millions, including those who are mentally or spiritually vulnerable and who have no immediate means of obtaining responsible direction. Not all exorcists are of one mind about the work. What does a layman do when she is faced with conflicting teachings from notable exorcists? She looks to the mind and heart of the church, and you would hope that is what most people would do, but I suspect that it's far easier for people to simply cede to the perspective and opinion that seems the most like authoritative and informed. And unfortunately, people like Chad are presenting themselves in that position for people. And I think a large number of people are falling for it. The church's guidelines for exorcisms indicate that verbal engagement between an exorcist and the demonic should be little to none. In an old rite, he is limited to asking only a very few and specific questions that must relate directly to the exorcism. In the new rite, they are dispensed with entirely. Even allowing for the permissions of the traditional rite, Chad is still frequently out of bounds. From the Praenotanda to the rite of exorcism, here's a block quote, the exorcist must not digress into senseless prattle, nor ask superfluous questions or such as are prompted by curiosity, particularly if they pertain to hidden or true matters, all of which have nothing to do with his office. Instead, he will bid the unclean spirit keep silence and answer only when asked. In a video for the instruction of exorcists, Monsignor Stephen Rossetti, chief exorcist for the Archdiocese of Washington, explains, even when you think they're telling the truth, they're the demons, probably not. So have them close their mouths. You don't really need to get information from them. Unless God commands them to tell the truth, and that doesn't happen very often, at least in my experience, beware, paint within the lines, and be obedient. You see, the church asks you and tells you to you exorcists to be obedient. Follow the guidelines of the church. If you don't, if you are disobedient, then you are sliding into a gray area and the demons will manipulate you, which I think is a really interesting insight if you are somebody who believes in demons and in spiritual evil. I am sure you are very familiar with the fact that throughout mythological and religious lore, demons are often presented as tricksters, as unreliable narrators, as beings that stoke division, basically. And so it makes good sense if you believe in those things and you believe you are interacting with these entities in situations like exorcisms, to probably not listen to too much of what they have to say because they don't really have anything of value to say. Dialoguing with the demonic to get information about the past, present, or future is divination. The Catechism of the Catholic Church is clear on this point. It does not say recourse to Satan or demons with intentions of doing evil. It simply says recourse to Satan or demons. Even if one presumes good intentions of those who fall into this, including exorcists, correction is in order, especially when a man's public ministry involves the spiritual care of millions. Monsignor Rossetti continues. When you interact with demons and try to get information from them, that's not listening, it's divination. You're using evil means, that is, demons, to give you information which you absolutely do not need. The sheer quantity of information that Chad claims comes from demons is such that it can never be recalled or deleted from the internet homes and parishes. It has formed the intellect and spiritual life of countless souls. Whatever good has come of it, the means are evil, and the enduring impact is malformation and demonic exposure. He's not only teaching using alleged gnosis from demonic sources, but he is teaching the faithful that this means of acquiring information is acceptable when it absolutely is not. I recently came upon a YouTube short in which Father said, the demons revealed the full complexion of what's going on in the church, and I quickly clicked off of it as Tolkien's account of Bilbo and the dragon came to my mind. Quote, he had been feeling rather pleased with the cleverness of his conversation with Smaug, but his mistake at the end shook him to better sense. Each of us needs humble correction at times for the good of the faithful and of the priest who may be intending the good. Some shaking to better sense is in order. We laity must understand that if an exorcist begins sharing quotes or insights from his dialogues with demons, immediately stop listening. Turn him off. He has become a mouthpiece of the diabolical, even if his intentions may be good, and if his words are laced with any boast or hubris at all about his profession or his dominance over the enemy, press the power off button even faster. Monsignor Rossetti teaches exorcists not to listen to demons. Quote, I command them to close their mouths in Jesus' name. Whenever demons start to speak, close your mouth in Jesus' name, close your mouth. I'm not interested in anything you have to say. You are a liar and a manipulator. Everything out of a demon's mouth is a lie or a manipulation. They will at times tell a little bit of truth, but they'll still manipulate it to gain their ends. So the important thing to realize is don't let them speak. Won't we be missing out on some special knowledge that an exorcist ought to give to the world? No. We have all that we need to know for our salvation accessible to us. That is also worth considering the prudent suggestion of the American bishops that the identity of the exorcist be kept secret or at most known only to the other priests of the diocese. There may be times when the public testimony of an exorcist can be humbly and prudently shared under the guidance and obedience of a bishop. And yet what we currently have is a marketplace for chatty, self-elevating exorcists in the church. The cash and clicks are flowing. Father Ripperger is not an isolated example. He is simply the most prominent. When I left the occult for Christ, I had to grapple with the shocking reality that I had been engaging with the demonic. My sincere spiritual pursuit was only love, rest, peace, and beauty, so I was initially defensive and skeptical of the suggestion that there was any evil in what I had been doing. I was not a Satanist or inclined toward the dark, so I felt secure in my behaviors. But as I entered more deeply into a sacramental life, scales began to fall, and I was alarmed by the realization of how quickly and easily I had been deceived. Being involved in the occult leaves a wound like Frodo's. Even after much healing, there is sometimes a vague dread that will unsettle and ache through the whole person. After healing, the wounded more easily recognize the abusers. The process of my involvement, learning to reintegrate with everything and everyone, but through a new lens fixated on the purity of Jesus Christ. I studied the faith and was blessed early on by the sagacity of the church regarding the demonic. Because my pain and fear were acute, I was quick to adopt the church's healing wisdom, much of which is absent from the prattle of the trending influencer exorcists. I spent decades seeking liberation from the confusion they are now sowing. Here are some of the most important lessons I learned, well, before I heard the same from Monsignor Rossetti. 1. Do not listen to the demonic. They are liars. They're always lying. We are not intelligent enough to know which parts of their utterances may contain truth. No dialogue. If we have a battle to fight, we do not discourse with demons. Instead, we turn to Christ. There will be a temptation to listen to what the demons have to say. Do not listen. Stop up your ears and keep away from media that glorifies the demonic, or even, or perhaps especially, when it wears a clerical collar. I think that is all very, very good advice for anyone, Catholic, Protestant, or otherwise, who could potentially get drawn into or feel attracted to these kinds of people. I think that this is all really, really good advice. You can interact with any information that you want to, but do so critically and carefully, and maintain your own mental sovereignty throughout that process. Don't subvert it to someone simply because they have a good sales pitch or they look like a reliable person because they're wearing the right outfit or something. In the rest of this article, she gets into more of her journey from terror to peace, finding peace and using the Catholic Church's teachings to kind of untangle what she had learned previously and the impact that people like Chad Ripperger had had on her spirituality and everything. I'm not going to go into that so much just because that's her personal journey. I was more so focused on the like exorcist specific stuff, but if you would like to read that for yourself, if you think that that would be helpful, you can find it linked down in the description document below. So with that said, there is one final article that I want to share with you. I'm not going to be reading this entire thing, but there's a bit towards the end, some advice that the author shares that's similar to the advice that was shared in the previous article that I just read that I think is worth concluding with. This was published on Catholic Stand, The Perils of Catholic Social Media by Masha Jobel. This was published, or Goebel, I'm not sure. This was published April 22nd, 2026. She or he, I'm not exactly sure, the author of this article has quite a bit to say about the different ways in which people are critiquing celebrity exorcists, including she goes after Mike Lewis for the way that he's chosen to go about it. It seems like some like bickering back and forth type of stuff that I don't really think is like super helpful or constructive for the conversation that I'm trying to have right now. If you want to read that in your own time, please, by all means, you can go and find this article below. But what I really wanted to draw everybody's attention to was the advice that the author includes at the very end of this, and I think it's relatively good advice. So let me see, where do I want to start at? I'll start here where she says, they say, step back. I'm saying she, it could be a man. I mean no disrespect, I'm not 100% sure. Remember the 90s, when we dial up the computer, read a few articles, taking notes on the neat legal pad our parents kept beside the computer for that purpose? Remember when message boards were more informative than interrogative because few of us were allowed more than 30 minutes online every other day and we just didn't have time for drama? I miss those days. We can't go back, not actually, but we can reclaim some of the attitude. We can use the internet responsibly, not to find out which Catholic failed this time, not to just vent our anger at liberal Catholics who miss Pope Francis or conservative exorcists who don't read Harry Potter. The trick is to reclaim our emotions from the algorithm. So get off social media. It's not healthy, not for men, not for women, definitely not for children. If you choose to use a social media platform for something like looking up crochet videos on YouTube or researching an article you're writing, keep your purpose in mind. This is not a place to make friends. This is not a place to trust the motives of the content creator. Quote, the best yarn in the world is Doreen's special wool, who happens to be a sponsor of this show, end quote, is only the most obvious way that influence is bought and sold. Don't fall so much in love with any public figure that you take his word on something without question. You don't really know these people. Remember what we all knew in the 90s, that not everyone on the internet is who he claims to be. Don't fall for rage bait. At the end of the day, your participation in the newest drama isn't necessary. Most of the time, you're speaking into an echo chamber. Almost no one changes his mind because of something he read on a blog. I realize that it feels like you're making a statement, it feels like advocating for or defending the decency of some person or group, but in reality, it's just catharsis. There is a place for calling out public figures, even priests. There is a place for defending those same public figures. The author of this article says that social media is not that place. It's not designed for intelligent conversation. We keep trying to use it that way, but it never works. Now, I will say that in general, I don't agree with the main thesis. I do think that the internet and social media in general are tools. I don't think that they are like entertainment venues. I don't think that they should become second or third homes. I don't think that social media should become our like third space where everybody's congregating and talking to the point where we no longer go out and interact with people like IRL around us, our family members, our friends, our loved ones. That is definitely a danger and a very real thing that I think we need to keep in mind at all times. I also do agree that social media is not an appropriate place for children. I don't think that children should have social media accounts. I don't think that their pictures should be shared. I don't think that parents should be posting videos and images of their children. It's not appropriate. all of that I definitely do agree with. But at the end of the day, I also do believe that social media and the internet, because it is a tool, they are just tools at the end of the day, you can use them for whatever ends or means that you have in mind. And we've seen people use them for very divisive means, and we've seen people use them to organize and to collaborate. And it's not all bad. I'm not definitely not throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of person when it comes to the internet or to social media. Although I do recognize the harms and the evils because I see it literally every single day. I think it's important to remember that these are tools, and we need to treat them with the intention that they deserve, with the focus that you would give to any other type of tool. Right? You wouldn't use a circular saw and like not be looking around at what you're doing as you're cutting and like slicing off fingers left and right. You wouldn't be doing that. And so we need to apply that same kind of care to tech and to the internet and to social media. And that's just my opinion. I think that it is very possible to use social media and the internet to accomplish good things, but I do not believe that these things are goods in and of themselves. They're kind of amoral. It depends. It's up to us how we use them, and it's undeniable that up to this point, people have been using social media, tech, and the internet, and everything else in really, really abhorrent and abusive ways. But it doesn't mean that it has to be that way. And it doesn't mean that there also is not good that is accomplished. I would have not ever found out about any of the stuff that I talk about now. I wouldn't have this channel. I wouldn't have done any of the work that I've done. I wouldn't have met any of the people that I've met. I wouldn't have traveled to other countries were it not for the work that I am doing here and the things that I've been able to learn, which have been facilitated by access to the internet, being able to search for and find information, and social media, being able to connect with other real people who have been through these situations and circumstances that I spend so much time researching and talking about. So that's a little bit more of a nuanced take, but I do think that this author's advice to be very, very careful about who you are falling for, who you are listening to, any public figure, the caution against just taking somebody's at their word and without questioning anything that they have to say. I think that that is all very, 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 very prudent advice. And if I could conclude with anything this from this episode today, it would be that to be careful about the people that you are listening to, the people that you are taking on board. Be careful about the advice that you are following, about the moves and the changes that people who claim to be like experts or professionals in some way, shape, or form are telling you to take. The world is full of grifters and conmen and creeps. And these grifters and conmen and creeps exist in every single strata of society and every single sector. And it is inevitable you are going to run into one eventually. And why would we think that a religious organization like the Catholic Church would be any different when this is the case literally the world over? So I wanted to share all of this with you today, a couple of interesting articles that had come out. I just hadn't had the time to sit down and do this because I've been working on other deep dives and research concerning the other niches that I am like into, which you can learn more about. But I wanted to take some time to wade back into the celebrity exorcist discourse a little bit, share some of the stuff that I was finding, and I have more that I will be sharing as well, because this is a very complex, convoluted, and very deep rabbit hole. I don't think that people who are sort of like surface level engaging with this stuff, or who are just like every once in a while watching videos of these figures on their like TikTok or Instagram or whatever, I don't think they realize how deep it goes. For a lot of people, I think it's very, very surface level, and the degree to which they interact and consider things is very surface level as well. And people know that. There are people who know that, and they're going to take advantage of that, and they're going to exploit that ignorance and that blind faith and blind trust. So be careful who you trust, be careful who you listen to, be safe, and please know that I want everyone to be able to practice their religious faiths of choice freely and without any type of threat or danger. And I view people like Chad Ripperger as dangers to people who are just trying to lead good lives with a rich spiritual, like interior life. I view people like Chad Ripperger as a threat. And if you don't, and you think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, that's perfectly fine. You can go and make a YouTube channel and talk about how great you think he is. That's not what I'm going to be doing here. So that's where I'm going to leave things for now. I will have more to say in the very near future. I have some other videos planned out about the whole celebrity exorcist thing. And then, like I said, I do want to eventually put out like a more comprehensive deep dive on the entire thing, because it's very complex, and it goes a really long way. But I hope that these little bits and pieces that I'm kind of sharing are just starting to put some things on your radar. You can start to like just take this on board and pay attention, and just have your head on a swivel. And maybe the next time you hear somebody promoting and rhetoric like the kind of thing that Chad loves to promote, maybe you will be a little bit more prepared to call it out or to recognize it as incorrect, especially if you are a practicing Catholic who is looking for spiritual leaders who can guide you. I hope that this alerts you and helps you be more safe, because that's my goal at the end of the day. If you or someone that you know is struggling with mental health, I have a variety of resources linked down below in the description. I've tried to pull from all over the world, so I may not have what you exactly need for your precise region, but maybe you can find something there that will help get you started in the right direction. Life is incredibly difficult. This kind of shit does not help whatsoever, but we do not have to go at it totally alone or unequipped. There are people who want to help, so if you need help, please reach out. Details to connect with me across social media, learn more about my various endeavors, and even support my work are all linked down below as well. If you are listening to this on YouTube, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps a lot. Please subscribe. It's free and it helps the channel and the work that I do so much. Please subscribe. If you are listening on a podcasting platform, please, if it's not too much trouble, take the time to leave a positive rating or a positive comment, because that also really helps the podcast and its performance and everything as well. If you feel like hanging around, you can go and check out the content over on the channel or the podcast. I have so many videos and so many deep dives. You could be there for days. And probably up until the point that I have a new video to release, which, like I said, hopefully will be in the not too distant future. But for the meantime, that is where I'm going to leave everything for now. Thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. And remember, nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Don't let the bastards drag you down.